Warren Hilsbos. He's an organizer with West Virginia Rising. They are doing why don't you tell us? It's happening on in 3 days. What is that? The Saturday.
Yeah. So April 9th, we're going to be having a coal Baron Blockade at the Granttown Palace, Virginia. Our intention is to show our plant outside of open significant numbers and express our outrage at the senator failing his duty to his constituents, his country, the world, to take the opportunity that his president, Joe Biden, offered the country to try to come up with a bipartisan Build Back Better plan to bring us out of this awful pandemic experience and begin to really build the infrastructure and human resources that we need to really thrive in the 21st century. Failing all of that to protect his own personal, corporate, and fossil fuel interests. He's left us all in the lurch, and there's lots of angry people, lots of disappointed people. And previous actions around the country in DC just haven't felt like personal enough that they're really singling him out as a key nexus of everything that's wrong with our country and our world. He's by no means alone, but he's really stood up to represent a certain strain of American thought that needs to be challenged.
So let me ask you this. There was this piece in the New York Times last week, I guess it was. And there's been reporting over the past several months by The Intercept that, all of this put together, it is just full on flabbergasting vision of total corruption and self-dealing that, I think the intersection of where he rose in state politics in West Virginia, and I'm sure West Virginia, this is a classic sort of this is what happens when you have these type of resources in a locality or whatnot, just breeds this type of corruption. But this is a guy who is completely self-dealing and making West Virginia energy consumers, I guess, pay for the fact that he's selling crappy coal to this power plant. How much of what you're doing is to bring, or let me ask you this, how much attention is there in West Virginia? How much understanding is there of what Joe Manchin did and continues to do to this day in terms of profiting off of not only the destruction of the planet, but also sort of charging his constituents for, he's getting a kickback from, it's so corrupt. I can't even wrap my head around it. How much of awareness is there in West Virginia of this?
Well, Sam, I honestly don't feel like there can ever really be enough awareness. But you might be surprised just how informed West Virginians really can be about, especially what's happening in their own backyards. It doesn't affect their lives, their livelihoods, their children's futures. And that's why so many people do care about it. But it's a difficult situation because West Virginia is resource rich, but that has unfortunately somewhat poor in principles, at least among our leaders. You don't go from being a U.S. senator in the carpet salesman to this kind of society without trying to break some rules and being able to get away with it. So what's really challenging, what we're really trying to fight, and notion we, the people, are limited in our power, that the system no longer really responds to us. And so we're trying to demonstrate, set a good example for our fellow West Virginians that we can, in fact, take our power back. And that's the number one thing we need to do that is to stand up, be heard, and say our piece, and to do it with principle. That the very thing lacking is the answer.
How much of what you're doing this weekend is geared towards getting the word out to West Virginians? Obviously, you guys don't have a TV station. I mean, the amount of media that's available to West Virginians, I would imagine, is fairly limited, and controlled and probably dominated by some fairly wealthy interests that I'm sure sort of got to go to these same people for whatever it is that they want, et cetera, et cetera. How do you guys get that information out there? Like specifically the information to West Virginians?
Yeah, well, I mean, one of the first things to do is, West Virginians are still Americans. More and more of us have internet and cell phones, so like everyone else. The thing of few years up to this is just how much, even in West Virginia, topics of conversation, the dynamic. That's the interesting mix of those conversations have reflected the wider country more and more and more. So we're turning to a lot of the same tools that you all using with internet tools of video conferencing, conversations, Twitter, Facebook, private messages amongst friend network, all of that sort of thing. And again, a lot of times the issue isn't just information; it's morale, it's vision, it's a belief again in principle and the value of standing up for that principle, whatever may come. So yeah, we just get out there and do the work, I guess, is the simple way to answer your question.
Where can people get more information and help with what you're doing? If you don't mind me referencing my own device here, just to make sure I get it right. I'm not a pro at this by any means.
No worries.
Just doing my best, doing my
great.
part.
You're doing great.
Let's see here. I mean, you can certainly search West Virginia Rising Twitter. Thank you. Basically, if you can search West Virginia Rising on Twitter and Facebook, those are our two best places. From there, you can find the websites and that sort of thing. And gotta be willing to trust the people a little bit and put it in their hands.
Great. Well,
100%.
I appreciate it. Warren, good luck this weekend, and hopefully you get a lot of people out there. I hope you get some press attention down there too, so that people, and we've got it up, we'll pop this up on the screen right now, and people can go to westvirginiarising.org, because, there's got to be some pressure applied when you have this level of corruption. It's just sort of shocking, not to mention the implications for the rest of the country. But it would be nice if the media could assess what Joe Manchin is doing, not necessarily in terms of some type of so-called centrist ideology, but just this is sheer corruption and him just self-dealing and protecting his own interests at the expense of, I don't know, billions of people. But
and I think it's fair to point out right now, if you don't mind, Sam, that right now he's kind of doing it all over again. He got this started with an energy crisis back in the 80s over Saudi Arabia and OPEC. And now he's trying to go right back to the very same playbook right now with what's going on in Ukraine. Rather than using this as an opportunity to recognize our dependence on fossil fuels overall, he wants to frame this as a problem of being dependent on foreign sources of fossil fuels. He wants to bring that business back to America.
All right. Well, Warren, Hilsbos, organizer of West Virginia Rising, really appreciate it. And thanks for coming on. I think we just lost Warren. We had a tough connection.